So as the Russia-Ukraine conflict continues unabated, the global quest for energy transition has hit a snag as Russia, one of the top producers, continues to be slapped with sanctions. While this is a setback, it has provided Africa's mining sector an opportunity to plug in and fill the void in energy transition. For more on this, we're joined by Jennifer Broadhurst, who is the Associate Professor of Chemical Engineering at the University of Cape Town. Thank you very much, Prof, for availing yourself this afternoon. Pray tell, what are these metals that are so in demand and what will they be used for?
Okay, so yes, what the many countries in the Western world are calling our critical minerals. That's our minerals for the generation, the storage and the transmission of green energy, for electric vehicles, for solar panels, for wind turbines. We're looking in particular, a lot of emphasis at the moment on your lithium, your battery, your electric vehicle battery minerals, lithium batteries in particular. There we're looking at cobalt, nickel, lithium, graphite. For wind turbines, we're looking at rare earth elements. These are particularly critical. Platinum group metals playing a huge role in the hydrogen economy. But even if we look at some of our bulk minerals and base metals, although their percentage increase is not quite as high, or predicted to be quite as high over the next sort of 3 decades, the actual quantities are going to be hugely in demand. Iron, copper, aluminium, all of these minerals are really essential for the low carbon economy because, you know, the number of metals and minerals that we're going to need for these technologies is order of magnitude higher than what we're using for our fossil fuel-based economy. We're looking at electric cars. You're using 6 times the amount of minerals and metals that you would use in a conventional car. For an offshore wind turbine, you're looking at 9 times the amount of metals and materials you would need for a gas-fired power station.
A 2020 World Bank report found that the production of minerals such as graphite, lithium, as you mentioned, and cobalt could increase by nearly 500% by 2050. Are we in a position as a continent to supply these metals and to plug or fill the gap, for lack of a better phrase? Maybe also just using the South African case study, when we take a look at our railway systems, cable theft and vandalism, are we in a position to actually provide the answers here?
Is anybody in a position? I mean, I think the only country that really is in a good position is China, which is making the Western world very, very nervous because they are supplying, you know, they really are dominating the markets at the moment. There is already, we are supplying 60% of the cobalt from the DRC and 75% of the world's platinum. And we are contributing enormously in other minerals from South Africa. Looking at manganese, chromium, we're the 5th largest in the world. So we already are suppliers, but we're not even beginning to tap into the huge potential. So we are seeing, certainly in the Northern Cape, that our copper industry has been a resurgence. The demand at the moment is exceeding supply globally, and this is causing quite a bit of panic. We saw that at the mining indaba, a lot of concern, particularly over the next 10 years, as to where all these minerals and metals are going to come from, and is Africa ready? I mean, we have got big lithium deposits in Zimbabwe, also there platinum, obviously the copper in Zambia, but there is an urgent need to really ramp up supply globally, and a lot of the consumers are looking, the battery makers are looking at Africa, but there's a lot of work to be done. Our infrastructure, there's a lot of challenges in terms of being able to really capitalize, and particularly capitalize in the short term. that is a concern. Obviously, locally, there's a lot of concern around the hold-up with licenses for exploration and for mining, a lot of red tape, and there's a lot of frustration. I don't know if you've seen any of the speeches coming out of the mining indaba, a lot of frustration from the Minerals Council in that we're not able to capitalize off this sort of resurgence in demand for minerals and metals because of all these barriers around transport, around licenses, etc., etc.
I guess add to that some regions that are quite volatile when we take a look at the security situation, maybe in the Sahel. But I'd like to pick up on your point on the urgent need to ramp up supply internationally. You speak of the Democratic Republic of Congo and the production of cobalt, 60% coming out of the heart of Africa. However, when we talk about getting into these deals, how much do we talk about responsible or ethical business, right, when it comes to these international companies and the continent? We've seen a number of documentaries, right, of children rather being used to mine some of these resources in the Democratic Republic of Congo. There's instability where you ask yourselves where people are getting their arms from and whose interests they are protecting.
Okay, now you're really speaking to my heart because this is the core of what I'm working at UCT and teaching on is responsible and ethical development of Africa's mineral resources. I believe in this very strongly. And of course, you know, this demand provides a lot of opportunities for mineral-rich countries. You know, you could potentially uplift and the communities, sort of deal with or contribute to alleviating poverty, uplift skills. But, yeah, the reality is that, you know, minerals, historically, your minerals and metals has been built on the back of sort of colonialism. It's brought more hardships and suffering than it has redemption. And there's a very real concern, I think, amongst the general global community around the fact that this acceleration of mining will just sort of aggravate the social and environmental impacts. There's a lot of concern also about biodiversity. You know, we're sitting here in the sort of the age of extinction of species. So there is a lot of concern. The good news is that, you know, a lot of progress has been made. There's a lot of emphasis on responsible and ethical sourcing these days. So we're finding that a lot of the actual consumers, the battery makers, are now sort of insisting on what we call a ESG performance, good ESG performance. This is environment, social, and governance performance from their suppliers. We are seeing investors that will not invest or provide finance for operations unless they meet very high ESG standards. So certainly there is an awareness. There's also a concern, obviously, in the international community around countries that have weak regulatory regimes, where there's poor governance, where there's a lot of corruption, and this has tended to cause people to sort of shy the international markets to shy away a little bit from Africa for good reasons. And we talk about responsible sourcing. I prefer to talk about responsible development of mineral resources, and I've been pushing this quite a lot internationally, saying, you know, it's one thing to say we will not source from countries or companies that do not meet ethical standards, where there is child labor, but that doesn't help the people in those countries. So I think we need to rather be part of the solution and contribute to and ensuring that the minerals and metals are supplied in a responsible manner. Yes, I think there's a lot of challenges. Artisanal mining, when you talk about Congo, I was actually challenged by some of the metal traders. Is there anything we can do around making sure that the metals that come from your informal miners, your artisanal miners, are more responsible, that they can be incorporated into the supply chains in a way that satisfies investors and consumers. So that is a really big challenge to look at, and it's one that I'm actually quite excited to get involved in. I think at the moment our biggest challenge is that a lot of these standards, there's a lot of good work being done, there's a lot of really good standards that are being developed, but they tend to still be voluntary, and then we see the performance amongst different companies and within different countries is still very erratic and very inconsistent, and this is a concern. You know, your multinationals, they have to keep to very, very high standards. They belong to the ICMM, the International Council for Mineral Mining and Metals, and they have international reputations. It's some of the smaller companies that I'm more worried about, or companies coming from countries where they don't have these kind of standards. So there is a concern around
Professor
this.
Broadhurst, unfortunately, that's all the time we can afford. But I do see that this has tugged at your heartstrings, but thank you very much. We look forward to actually getting more detail or getting an update and progress report following that engagement that you will be having. Thank you very much for availing yourself this afternoon.